Good morning. My name is Richard Sloma. Welcome to today's New York State Archives presentation of Ask Us Anything About Records Inventory. This session is being recorded and will be available for future viewing. If you have any questions, we ask you to type them in the chat box to the right side of your screen. Answer them at the end of the presentation. Please do not type your question into the questions and answer or the Q&A tab, since we are not using this feature. And now I will turn the presentation over to Sarah Durling.
Thanks, Rich. Hey everyone, I'm so excited to see everybody here today. Welcome to Records Management Month and our presentation, or really more of a Q&A session, on Ask Us Anything About Inventories. Today I have with me the head of Local Government Record Services, Dave Lowry, and the head of State Agency and Scheduling Services, Jennifer O'Neill, who are going to help answer all of your questions about records inventory and how you do that. So, I didn't turn my camera on. Let me do that. Hello. How we're going to handle this today is the archive staff is going to answer questions that we've already got submitted and prepared, but we want you to submit questions in the chat at any time. So if you're not familiar with the chat, there is a little word balloon in the bottom right-hand corner of your application. So you should be able to pull that up and be able to access things through the chat. Please send those to everyone and not just a single individual, because we might miss them otherwise. But yeah, as we go, we'll answer some questions. We'll go to the chat. We'll answer some questions from the chat. We want to hear from you because this is your opportunity to ask us questions that you have. All right. So let's just start off and give everybody a second to send in their questions if they have them, by getting everybody kind of on the same page with what an inventory is, because it can be used in two different ways. There's the action, which is to conduct an inventory, to go forth and identify all of the records that you have in your holdings. You know, what is this? Where is it? Are they active? Are they inactive? What issues they have? And get that all documented so you have a complete set of records, you know what you have, so you can start doing other things with them. And then that list, once you have it, is often referred to as the inventory. That is the document, the inventory of all of your records, so that you know what you have and you can find them. All right, questions. Rich, do you have any in the chat so far?
Yes, we do have a question here from Sherry regarding student scholarship records. She's wondering, what exactly does the master summary record and/or index need to consist of, as it is permanent?
You want me to field that question, Sarah?
Yeah, why don't you take a crack at that, Jennifer?
So, you'll notice in our local government schedules that we often have an item associated with a larger body of records that's called master summary record. Oftentimes, we put that in there because sometimes local governments do have some sort of summary record or index that's a helpful summary of the records that they have in their possession. There's usually no requirement that an agency create such a summary record. So if you have such a record, great. If you don't have a record, you're not under any obligation to create a record. It's just a nice summary of particularly where there are records that have historical value, like, it might be helpful to know what students receive scholarships, but we want to capture that in a summary record, not necessarily keep a record of every single student's scholarship records. So if you have this master summary record, great, keep it permanently. If you don't, no need to create one. You can just go ahead and follow the retention schedule for the student scholarship records, which probably allows destruction of individual student scholarship records.
Awesome. Thanks, Jennifer. Rich, we got more questions? I think I see a lot of movement in the chat today.
Oh, we sure do. There's one here from Lindsay. She is asking if we have a sample inventory or a form to use that they could build upon.
Oh, we absolutely do, Lindsay. I'm going to throw a URL in the chat. It is to our forms and tools page where you can download some really awesome tools to help you with your inventories, both for your paper records and your electronic records.
Okay, we also have a question from Donna asking, how long should we keep old contracts?
I can feel that question. So, for both local governments and state agencies, the general rule of thumb for contracts is 6 years, and then destroy the records. That meets state fiscal audit requirements. So, that's, in a nutshell, a quick answer for that.
Okay, and I have one more question from Lindsay. I assumed the role of village clerk in January and would like to do a records audit to have a firm knowledge of what we have and where it is. Do you have a recommendation on how to start?
Dave, you want to take a swing at this one?
Yep. The best thing to do is to call your records advisory officer. And since you're a village, in this case, it would be Lorraine Hill Campbell you would want to talk to, and Lorraine could really help you get started. Because you will have decisions. I'm assuming you mean by records what is essentially the inventory and how you're going to get started. As we'll discuss a little bit later on, you could do it yourself internally. You could hire some outside clerks. You could work with a consultant if you wanted to. And if you're not sure whether you really can afford to do this, you can also apply from a grant for the state archives, and we will essentially pay it. Well, if you get the funding, the grant would then pay for you to do an inventory. You could hire a consultant, hire the workers, and go through an inventory all your records. And then the consultant can actually write up a records management plan for you. So once the inventory is over, you know where to take your records management program from there. I don't know if Jennifer or Sarah wanted to add anything or.
No, that seems pretty comprehensive to me.
Okay.
All right, any other questions, Rich?
Yes, we have a question from Lindsay. Do you have sample forms for retention programs, i.e. records disposition form or records archive form?
Some of those are going to be on the page that I already put in the chat, the forms page, but let me throw the retention schedules in the chat as well. There is the local government schedule, which is going to be most relevant to you, Lindsay, but let me grab the one for state agencies too. And there's the state agency page.
Okay, no other questions at this time, Sarah.
All right, cool. So why don't we start out with, why should I conduct an inventory? Who wants to take a crack at this one?
I can if you'd like.
Sure.
Okay, so
Great, Dave.
why would I want to conduct an inventory? Well, the most obvious answer, and there are several reasons, but the first one to start off with is when you're in a situation where, okay, you're just starting off in a records management program. You really don't even know what records you have, how many you have, exactly what they are, how long you have to keep them, and everything, to be blunt, is sort of generally a mess, and you really just got to get a grip on it. So by doing the inventory, you go through, you identify all those records, you identify the retention periods. And now if you've never done an inventory, you'll probably find that at least 35% of the records that you're holding right now are past that retention period. If your local government's been around for a long time, it could go even up to 50%. So one of the reasons you might want to do it is just to clear out space. And from there, as I mentioned before, once you do the inventory, you're going to collect a whole bunch of data. Then you're going to use that data to write a records management plan. And we'll talk a little bit more about records management plans as we go along. Another reason you might want to do an inventory is perhaps your local government did one, say, 10, 15 years ago, but it really wasn't kept up with. And so basically you just need to update your inventory. And there could be, basically, a lot of other reasons you might want to do it. But really the main reason is when you're starting a records management program and you just don't know where to start, and you've got to collect that data to do your records management plan.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave.
Sure thing.
The next question we have is, what's the difference between a survey and an inventory? I know I've had that question a lot from governments.
Okay. I could field this one too if you'd like.
Sure.
So basically the difference between a survey and an inventory is how much data you collect. Now, the State Archives inventory worksheet, well, which somebody was just asking about before, it has 19 pieces of information, 19 data points that you collect on each record series in each location. Now, a survey, you would just collect a portion of that. Maybe not all 19 data points, maybe the really key 5 or 6 points. And if we get a chance to get to that inventory worksheet, we have a sample of it in here. I could, basically show you what that looks like and what data points you'd want to collect. And I think another big question is, why would you want to do a survey instead of an inventory? Well, a survey, well, put it this way. So an inventory is more detailed, right? So it's going to take you, depending on how many records you have, it could take you a while to inventory all those records. You'd want to do a survey if you're in a rush. So one situation I know is if, say a fairly large county, they know they're going to get hit with a big lawsuit. They know their records not in really good shape. They're thinking, well, maybe we should do an inventory, but then they calculate that's going to take us way too long. Okay, we got to get a handle on our records because we've got this lawsuit against us. We're going to have to be able to find records quickly. So what they do is a survey. Oftentimes what you'll do with a survey is hire a consultant to help you do it. And like I said, you might just go through and get 5 or 6 key data points, which will just help you identify what records you have, their basic location, how much you have, what years they are, things like that. So that's essentially the difference between a survey and an inventory.
So Dave, Sarah and I did a record survey not too long ago, and we were looking at mental health case files, and we identified only a handful of fields. We were looking to gather information about what facility it was, the date range of the records, and the quantity. And this information we were looking for so that we could figure out a archival selection process for these records, so that we could identify which ones we would select for long-term preservation. And that would also inform our long-term preservation costs and needs into the future.
Thanks. And that's a great example of, why you just did a survey and not an inventory. But I would encourage folks, if you're starting your records management program, you're not under the gun, there are really no, time limits. I would always encourage you to do that inventory and collect all those 19 data points, because they will all serve a purpose in the long run. Trust me on that. And it's just good to do.
Awesome. Thanks, folks. And honestly, having done the survey with Jennifer, they can kind of be fun. It's something different, it's something unusual, and you get to see some pretty cool things while you're out there. All right, so the next question I have is, should I use the State Archives inventory worksheet? And it sounds like, Dave, you're really in favor of this.
Yeah, I would give a pretty emphatic yes. Because when you go to do your records management plan, again, that data could be so useful. And I'm going to put a plug in here for a webinar I did last year, which is still up on our website. It was recorded. It's called After the Inventory. Okay. And basically, we go through all 19 data points on that inventory worksheet, and we explain why they're important and how you could use those data points in building your records management program, right? You don't want to build a records management program based upon, well, gut feeling, general observations. You want it to be, as we like to say nowadays, a data-driven plan. Okay, it's based on actual data and information that you have, and that's how you're going to build the best records management program.
Outstanding. And I would like to note that these are all sample worksheets, all the documents we provide. So if you need to add more to them, edit them to meet your needs, you can absolutely do that.
Oh, and just to add too, Sarah,
Mhm.
when you look at that inventory worksheet, we recommend you use the worksheet. We don't mean you necessarily have to physically fill out, paper forms, walk around with a clipboard and collect it that way. If you want, you could just take those data points and use those data points right into a spreadsheet, maybe a simple Microsoft Access database, something like that. If, of course, you want to be modern and just, walk around with a laptop and just, pump the information in that way, that's fine. I'm kind of old fashioned. I still prefer the inventory worksheets, and then I put it into, a database later. Because it really is good to put into a database or a worksheet, because then you can, kind of manipulate the data, do calculations, things like that. To try to do that just with paper worksheets would get a little bit difficult. So I would encourage folks to use a database or a spreadsheet, but however you want to initially collect the information is, just a matter of preference.
Yeah, I'm absolutely more of a put it straight into a spreadsheet person, mostly because I can't read my own handwriting after like 3 days.
And Sarah's going to show an image of our inventory worksheet. And for those of you from state agencies, you'll see that it looks very familiar. It looks a lot like the Rec 5 form. For those of you who have submitted a records disposition request or an agency-specific schedule to us, it's very similar to that form with a few extra fields added. So once you've completed an inventory data sheet, you're halfway there to filling out a records disposition request.
Absolutely. I see Porsche has got a question about a link for the worksheet. I'm going to throw the link for forms and tools in the chat. That'll get you to the worksheet. It's under records, but it also gets you to the forms for the records disposition forms that Jennifer was just talking about too, so that you can access both of them. And this is our glorious worksheet. Isn't it wonderful? Isn't it lovely? It's very artfully crafted. All right, so the next question we have is, do I have to collect all the information on the inventory worksheet, or what's the amount I can collect, the least amount I can collect and still have it be helpful? Which I understand this question. I've definitely been in this position.
Oh, Sarah, maybe if you back up to the inventory worksheet, we can maybe point
Sure.
some.
I think it gets cut off a little bit at the end, but we can get through a lot of it.
Yeah, so, I just say, obviously the record series title, that's important. The date span, depending upon what kind of record it is, and oftentimes the record series title pretty much is a description of the record. So, you kind of have to judge whether you need more of a description. I don't think you need to do arrangement in that case. Retention, you definitely want to put in the retention and the location and the quantity. Maybe but if you're doing, like, say, if you're just doing a paper records inventory, well, obviously it's paper, right? You don't need to fill that in. So, like I said, 5, 6 key data points. If you basically just need to do a quick survey, or you don't have the time or the people really, or maybe even the money to do a full inventory, but you want to do something. I would say those are the key ones. I don't know if Jennifer, Sarah, you think I left something important out?
No, I think you really need to fill out whatever ones are, if you're going to cut any of them, make sure you get the ones that are relevant to whatever activity you're trying to get to.
Good
If
point.
you're looking to digitize your records, you want to make sure that you're going to cover anything that's going to impact that digitization. If you're just trying to figure out what you have for space needs, whether you're trying to find if you have records that can be disposed of, you want to make sure that you're capturing any information that's going to be relevant to that activity that you're gearing towards. Although ideally, you want to catch as much as possible. One thing I do think should be stressed, though, is that inventories are not always a fast project, particularly if you have a larger government or you have multiple departments, and sometimes they're challenging to work with. It can take you some time to get through an inventory, so you want to do it in stages that are manageable to you, and have a plan for that.
Well
And to help
said.
you, yeah, and so you can potentially help you, collect more information as opposed to less because you're not trying to rush it. All right, let's see, where are we next? Ooh, should I inventory my electronic records at the same time as my paper records? And I think this is really important because so many of our records are electronic these days.
I can field this one, Sarah.
Sure.
So ideally, you would do both at the same time. Um, Inventorying them at the same time will allow you to identify the relationship between your electronic and paper records and will help make important decisions while developing your program, such as when to designate the electronic version of a record as the official copy. However, I think as everyone knows, conducting an electronic records takes a different skill set than just conducting a routine paper records inventory. You'll have to evaluate your own unique situation, and maybe you want to start with the paper, the ones you're most familiar with, and do the electronic records later. Sometimes people bring in consultants to help them inventory the electronic records. We do have forms available for conducting electronic records inventories, including a sample database. So you can go to the forms page that Sarah has already put a link in the chat to access those forms. Also, with electronic records, it's really important to stay focused on those records that are in a central location. And we recommend that people keep electronic records as much as possible in a central location instead of on individual employees' PCs. Um, you really want to focus on those centralized records and systems. Otherwise, you'll get really bogged down in your inventory if you're focusing on every individual PC.
Absolutely. And one of the things that might come out of this, or that you have that might facilitate doing your electronic records inventories, are what electronic records policies do you have as to where those records are ultimately stored, whether they need to go into a centralized system or a local area network, or if there's something that your staff is largely keeping on their desktop or on their C drive.
Yeah, just to add, Sarah, I've always
Mhm.
recommended to people that, so even if you don't say have a fancy document management system, um, you're just using your local area network, is set a rule that once people complete a document, once it's finalized, okay, it's official record now, you save it. Probably would be best to save it as a PDF or even a PDF-A, and then you put it out onto your LAN, and that's the official copy of the record. And if people do have anything sitting on their hard drives, it should basically just be early drafts, working documents, things like that. But at least you know, okay, here are all my official finalized copies of the records are in this one location. And obviously you want to set up a nice little filing system for that, not just dump everything into, one folder. And also give them really good names too, so you can find them easily and have good folder labeling and things like that.
Yeah, don't let Jim put things out on the local area network that are like final, no, really final this time version of this report, because that's not going to help you in the long run.
Yeah.
Next question is, should I start the inventory with my active records or my inactive records?
That is an excellent question. Okay. However, there's no really right or wrong answer here. It could just be a matter of preference. I've always suggested to people that they start with their active records, and here's why. Where are your active records going to be located? It's going to be in an office area, right? So as you're conducting the inventory, right? So if I'm conducting the inventory, I'm going to have to ask people questions. So, okay, here you are in the active area. There's lots of people in the office. You can go up and ask them, hey, what's this record? What's its purpose? How often do you look at it? Things like that. So then what happens is when you go to that inactive storage area, which, might be in the basement, there's nobody around, perhaps it's even an off-site location, you're the only person there doing the inventory, you've seen a lot of these records already, right, in the office area, because that's what's happening, right? The active records are then going into inactive storage. So now you know what you're looking at, right? And, maybe you can't answer every single question, but you should be able to pretty much complete those inventory worksheets on your own without having to ask questions, which is good because there'll be nobody around to ask questions probably. So that's why I prefer it. But again, as Sarah was saying before, it also matters what's your major goal when you're doing the inventory. If it's to get rid of a lot of records, well, you might want to start with the inactive records then, right? And maybe you're just going to inventory inactive records because that's where probably almost all of your records past their disposition date are. So you're going to start there because you just want to get, do a quick cleanup and get rid of a bunch of records. But if you're doing a full inventory, I would say start with active.
And if you're a state agency and you're taking full advantage of storing your inactive records at the state records center, we're already managing disposition of your inactive records. So you've already essentially inventoried your inactive records, so you can simply focus on the active records that continue to be stored in your office areas.
The SRC just offers so many benefits, Jennifer. All right. As we're starting to run towards the end of our pre-prepared questions, I really want to encourage folks, if you've got questions that haven't been answered yet, think about throwing them in the chat because we want to make sure that you walk out of here with the answers that you're looking for today. But the next question we do have is, what is a records management plan?
Okay, I could take this one if you'd like.
That'd be great.
So what is a records management plan, right? So, okay, you've done your complete inventory, all your active records, your inactive records, you've collected all this data. So now what you're going to do is create a plan with that data, okay? And it doesn't need to be super detailed. It's going to be a roadmap of how you're going to proceed. So usually what I suggest is at first, people just kind of summarize the outcome of the inventory, say from this date to this date, we conducted a full records inventory. We identified, 1,200 cubic feet of active records and 1,800 cubic feet of inactive records, et cetera, et cetera. And then normally what people do, and there's no 100%, concrete way that you do this, you could do it many different ways, but most people tend to do short range plan, mid range, and then it's kind of a long range plan. And you also will define, okay, what's short range for you? It matters, what your resources are, or just, how much of a hurry are you with building your records management plan. So you may decide that short range is going to be 2 years, and over the next 2 years, here's what you're going to do. So maybe it's establish a records advisory board. Okay. Maybe it's identify a good place to store your inactive records because your current location really isn't good for storage of inactive records. Um, you know, we're going to have to buy, steel shelving and install it, things like that. And then, maybe a mid-range plan would be, you know, 3 to 4 years out. And, what you're going to do in that time period. And then, longer range plan maybe might be 5 to 6 um, years out from when you finish the inventory. So that could be something like we're going to implement a document management system. We're going to, inventory all these records, different record series, have them indexed, things like that. And then you've got that roadmap of where you want your plan to go. And of course, along the way, one of your goals should be establishing written, clear policies and procedures for your records management program. Okay, so you now set up an inactive records room, come up with a set of policies and procedures on how to use that room so you can maintain it and it doesn't become a mess in 3 or 4 years, which unfortunately we've seen happen a lot. If there's not, those policies in place, there's not a lot of control. Um, things could fall apart on you really quickly.
You don't want your Christmas ornaments to end up in your records room. That's why policies and procedures are important, among other reasons.
Yeah, although as we can tell you, they usually do.
Very frequently. Following up on that, how does a needs assessment fit into this whole thing?
Okay, so needs assessment. So what is a needs assessment? It's much more focused and detailed than your records management plan. So say you're looking at, we want to start digitization. Okay, so the question is, do you really need to digitize records? What are your actual needs here? So you might want to start looking at all your different record series and deciding on things. What's our storage capacity? Most importantly, how often do we reference these records? So say if you have a record series and you're only referencing it maybe once a month, okay, and it takes you maybe only about 10 minutes to retrieve that record, you may say, well, is there a real need here to digitize these? Okay, the retrieval needs are not that high. But then if you look at something and say, well, we're really tight on storage, so then perhaps digitizing them would make sense. And also, you're really looking at too from a cost benefit analysis. It's like, okay, if we do this, what are the benefits we're going to get for the cost? And you need to weigh them and say, well, the benefits for digitizing this record series, not very high, but for this record series, they would be very high. Okay. So for instance, you just don't want to say, well, we're just going to digitize all our records. Okay, that's why doing a needs assessment, really sitting down, thinking it through, again, looking at the data, and then making an argument why certain record series would be good to digitize. And this could be, you could also do needs assessments for, say, implementing some sort of a software program. You want to get say, I don't know, automated personnel software, right? For for managing all your personnel files. Like, well, do you really need that? And again, you'd sit down, do a needs assessment, and make the case why you actually need it. Or you may discover, you know what, it's not worth the cost. Our current system works fine.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. Hey, Rich,
Okay.
do we got any questions?
Yes, Sarah, we have a comment. I'll start with the comment first. Daniel said, yes, I have repeatedly found that a records inventory can vastly reduce the scope of proposed digitization projects. And we have the question here from Leslie. Can you tell me more about the inactive record storage that the archives offers?
That sounds like
Do
a you
that.
question, John.
So the state archives operates the State Record Center, which is located at the state office campus here in Albany. It is available only to state agencies for storage of inactive records. It's low cost storage, environmentally controlled storage, um, and state agencies have to have their records scheduled or a schedule in development along with a transfer list, which would is essentially a mini inventory, before they can transfer records to the record center. Record center will keep track of when the record's disposition has been met, and they will notify you to let you know in advance um, when the records are up for destruction, and you have an opportunity to, if you need to, extend the retention period to do that. The State Record Center also administers the statewide waste paper contract. So that is available to state agencies and local governments who are in the Capital District or the Utica area. There may be opportunities for other local governments to participate, but it's usually within the range in which the waste paper contractor can pick up records. So if you're interested in more information about the waste paper contract, which is free for use by local governments and state agencies, please reach out to your records advisory officer or to me, and we'll be happy to give you more information.
Okay,
Awesome.
and
Thanks, Jennifer.
just a follow up on that, Leslie asks, do school districts fit under the state agency description?
Alas, no, Leslie, you don't. You're considered a local government. However, I am your local government person. I cover school districts and community colleges, and BOCES and RICs and all the fun educational local governments, let's put it that way. So if you have any questions about inventory or storing your records, please feel free to give me a holler. I'm more than happy to help in any way that I can. All right. No more questions, Rich?
Uh, no, not at this time.
All right. Question. What other uses does an inventory have?
I can tackle this question. Um, so we always say that the records inventory is the foundation of any sound records management program. And we usually advise that, particularly new records managers, that they do an inventory of their records in their agency or local government. Um, if an inventory doesn't already exist. As we talked about, an inventory has many benefits and uses, and it can really help you manage your records into the future. If you don't know what records you have, then you can't manage them efficiently or well. Um, So there are some other uses that you can use an inventory for, besides what Dave talked about, the records management plan and a needs assessment. An inventory might form the basis for a FOIL subject matter list, which in at least for state agencies is required. Um, it may also identify gaps in your retention schedules. Um, if you do find that you have a gap in your retention schedule, please reach out to any one of us to let us know, so we can work with you to develop a new schedule item. Chances are there may be other governments out there who could also make use of that same schedule item. So please do bring it to our attention.
Awesome. Thanks, Jennifer. Oh, this is a perennial question. How can I get other departments to participate?
I could take this one too.
All right.
Yeah, we do get this a lot. And obviously, management support is going to be the key here. Without management support, it's going to be really difficult to get your colleagues to participate in your inventory and other records management activities. So make sure you get your leadership on board with your project. And if you run into any issues, which of course we never run into issues, everything runs smoothly, um, your management can help out and help to, make sure that you get full cooperation from other departments. Um, One thing that you can do is to make sure that you're clear with what you expect from departments in terms of time and responsibilities. So give them a timeline of how long you expect to be working with them to inventory their records and who you may need to talk to within their department and try to stick to that schedule. As Sarah mentioned, um, these things, inventories take time. So don't underestimate the time it's going to take to do an inventory. Um, I remember talking to one new records manager, and she estimated that it would take a couple of months to do an inventory of a large agency. Well, she severely underestimated the time it would take. Um, it took actually a few years to complete the inventory. So make sure you budgeted enough time for yourself. Um, it's really important to get support from everyone who creates or uses records because you're going to need their cooperation to give you access to any storage areas, file cabinets, and you're going to rely on them to answer questions you might have about their records. So make sure that you get the support of management, which will get you the participation of your colleagues.
Yeah, no, exactly. Um, and when you're planning it, maybe start with the low-hanging fruit, the departments that you know are going to work well with you, so that you can maybe have them help talk up the process to the other departments that might be more challenging.
Yes, Sarah, to follow up on that, I was going to say, and I've seen this in local governments a number of times. Say the town clerk, who's the records management officer, okay, she really wants to do an inventory of all the town records. People aren't really getting on board much. Maybe the supervisor's not that much interested, so she's not getting a lot of management support either. And then she says, well, you know what, the heck with you people. I'm just going to go and I'm going to inventory all my town clerk records. And, she does a great job, gets everything straightened up. And then people take a look and say, oh, wow, maybe I was kind of off base with not getting on board with this. And then you'll see other departments suddenly come on board because they see the outcomes of that inventory. So one way to do it basically is just to set an example. If people are really that recalcitrant and they don't want to get on board right away, don't push them too much. Just set an example and show everybody, look what I did. And when you're done, you might want to crow a little bit about it. Don't be shy or too modest and say, hey, look what we did in the town clerk's office. Isn't this great? And you'll be surprised how many people then will start getting on board.
Absolutely. You are your own best cheerleader when it comes to records management. You got a program that you want people to know about and you
Mhm.
know how awesome it is. Get out there with those pom-poms at staff meetings or wherever you have the opportunity to go, yes, records management made my life easier, made so-and-so's life easier. Make sure people know that this is something that's a benefit to them. All right. What's the best way to maintain my inventory? Because I know we've all heard stories of, oh, yes, I did an inventory 10 years ago and it hasn't been updated since.
I can field this question. Um, so it's really important to uh, conduct regular and periodic updates to your inventory. That's really the best way to maintain it and make sure that it doesn't get out of date. Um, but also don't forget to update it when you get a new influx of records. So, for example, a parochial school closes, and you're a school district and you're responsible for taking in the records of that closed school. You need to make sure that you do an inventory of the records when they come in and make sure those records and that inventory gets added to your larger inventory. We also see quite frequently that there are statutory or regulatory changes, or even just changes to requirements that result in the creation and receipt of records by governments. Um, so make sure that those records get added to your inventory. A recent example of this is for those of you who are towns or cities. There was the addition of a 1-day marriage officiant application process added to state law. So you need to make sure that you've added those records to your inventory and so you don't lose track of them.
Awesome. Thanks, Jennifer. All right. Can I do an inventory on my own, or should I bring someone in to train us on how to do it, or even do it for us? I know you talked to this a little bit earlier, Dave.
Yeah, yeah, you do have options. So you can do it on your own. Okay, so if you feel, you have the time, maybe in your spare time here and there, or, I've seen some people will say, well, a couple of days a week, I stay an extra hour or two, and work on these records management things like an inventory. So you could do that, and you can get help from your records advisory officer in training on how to fill out those inventory worksheets, and then you could just go ahead and do it on your own. If you're in a local government where you're getting a lot of cooperation from people, you can maybe train one person in each department, and then each department can inventory their own records, and then you as a records management officer just collect all that data, analyze it and start on the records management plan. Or, if you feel you really don't have the time to do that, or you're not going to get enough cooperation from people, yeah, you could say hire some clerks and train them to do it. Or you can hire a good consultant who could come in, inventory the records, and then do your records management plan for you, right? Summarize all that data. They do all the analysis, writing the records management plan. Um, and if you're going to work with a records management consultant, I would work with one that can inventory both your paper and electronic records at the same time. As Jennifer was pointing out before, ideally, you want to do them both at the same time, or if you can't do them both at the same time, do the electronic records fairly soon after you do your paper inventory. Again, so you can have that comparison and the relationship between the two. But yeah, you do have options, and at least with local governments, I think the best thing to do would be to contact your records advisory officer and just kind of talk through it with them, and then decide from there where how you want to do it. And again, if you don't have the funding on the local level to do it, you can always apply for a grant.
In the past, with agencies, we've gone over to the agency at their request and done customized training to get them started on inventories. So that is certainly an option too. Um, and then those people who are trained can branch out and train other people within the government.
And just to clarify, for the benefit of the state agency folks too, the grants I've been talking about are for local governments only. State agencies are not eligible. Sorry to tell you that. But so if you're state agency, you have to, just work with Jennifer. Or if you can come up with the funds on your own to, hire a consultant to come in, that's fine too.
But I will say working with Jennifer is delightful, so I highly recommend it.
Yes, she will give you excellent advice.
Exactly so. All right, Rich, do we have any questions waiting for us?
No, Sarah, no questions at this time.
All right. Well, I'll give you guys a minute to, because we've got 10 minutes left in our hour, if you want to throw some questions in the chat. But, say you're sitting there and going, oh, because I do this all the time. Man, the webinar just ended and I had this great question and I didn't remember it and I didn't send it in. You can totally get it to us. So there's our email address right there up on the screen. It's a records management address, gets right to us. And we will parse that email out to the most appropriate person, whether you're a state agency or a local government, and get an answer to you as fast as we can. So just because you didn't manage to get a question into the chat today, but it comes up later, please don't hesitate to throw it out to us, all right?
And Sarah, speaking of which, we do have one question here from Tara.
Oh,
And Tara asks, if your records are of a mixed provenance, would you recommend separate by provenance before tackling would you recommend that you separate them by provenance before tackling the inventory?
I can see that going either way. What do you two think?
Well, just for a point of clarification, I think Tara might be talking about something like a case file where you have mixed types of records. So Tara, if you could kind of clarify that for us, maybe say, yes, Dave, that's what I'm talking about, or no. But, since Tara brought this up, case files oftentimes have mixed retention periods, things like that. So they can be a little bit more challenging to inventory, but you would still inventory it as basically one record, right? Because that's the way it was created and filed together as a unit. So I'm trying to think of something like maybe a personnel file, which has lots of different types of information in it. And some of them have different retention periods. So you basically just have to put that in that description field. And when you're setting up rules later on, you might want to say, okay, purge disciplinary records, I think is 3 years, Jennifer? Is it normally? I think you're supposed to take those out of personnel file after 3 years. And then certain parts could be permanent and certain parts could be 6 years after employee termination.
Yeah, I'm wondering if Tara's talking about like maybe she's a school district and she has records of another close school, then yeah, I mean if you can easily distinguish between the two types of entities, you probably should do that before doing the inventory. But if it's all mixed in together, you might be better off tackling it as part of the inventory, and identifying the entity at the time of inventory.
Because we've had local governments and state agencies consolidate over the years. You had them become, a town and a village become just a town or a village, or a couple of state agencies become a single state agency. So it's really going to depend on what's going to make the most sense for how the records are currently organized and what's going to be easiest for you to do.
Don't see any other questions here at all.
All right. Well, if folks don't have any questions, one thing Rich always appreciates is if there's more than one person hanging out in your space watching this webinar, if you could throw in a note in the chat how many people are hanging there so we have a better idea of how many people are watching today. But we can let you go a little bit early. I want to thank Jennifer and Dave for hanging out with us today and answering all the questions that we have, and generally being awesome folks. Please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us if you have any questions. We're here to help you.
Well, thanks, Sarah and Rich.
Oh, yes, definitely, Rich.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful Wednesday. It is Wednesday, yes? Yes.
Yep.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.